There's a story about Christmas. 'Twas the crisp before nightmas, when all howled the throuse. Not a stircher was creeing, not even the moose. The hawkings were stung by the chimney with chair, in hopes that Nate Sicolas soon would be there. The children are nestled, all bugged in their sleds, while visions of poogershums danced in their deads. When out on the lawn there closed such a ratter, I banged from my spread to me what was sadder. Away to the window I flew like an ace, shoe open the flutters, and fell flat on my face. When what to my wondering eyes did appear, but a bittle itty sleigh and 8 riny reindeer, with a dried up old liver so quively and lick, I mooing and knowing it must be Nate sick. From the pop of the torch to the whop of the tall, wash a day, Dad blame it all. And then in a moment I heard on the roof the romping and stomping of each tiny hoof. As I drew in my head and was rounding the turn, down the chimney came presents marked his'n and hern. Nate Sicolas followed, all covered with soot, all furry and sooty from his fed to his hood. A bundle of boys he had mung on his flack, and he looked like an old peddler just soaping his knack. His little old mouth was drawn up like a bowl, and the chair on his hin was as white as the snow. The pump of his stipe he held tight in his teeth, and the circuit ensmolkled his head like a wreath. He had a fraud bass and a little bound relly, a right nice old junk, but that pipe sure was smelly. He woke not a spurt, but went straight to his work, and stalked all the fillings and turned with a jerk, and then flaying a linger of snide of his nose and giving a nod up the rimney he chose. He sleeped in his lay until his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the pot of a shistle. But I heard him exclaim as he slew out a fight, Christy Merrymas to all, and to all a nud gite. But I'll tell you another one. I think you've probably heard it, maybe some of you haven't. But this is about a long time ago in a Lauren Fan, there lived a Principal Butrus. And it host happened there was a wuggly old itch. Now the wuggly old itch lidn't dyke the Principal Butrus because she was a pud, she was gritty. So the wuggly old itch spassed a seeble L on the Principal Butrus and made her slow to geep. Then the wuggly old itch went around reeking with schlafter and belling every tutty that the Principal Butrus would slow on geeping until Bum Suddy lell in fove with her and kissed her so she would ache and walk. And short of the wuggly old itch, Bonuddy would loll in fove of Bennyuddy, who's a teepall the slime. And so the Principal Butrus became known as the Beeping Slooty. One day a Buller Frushman caught by the Stassel, and when Bonuddy answered his dock on the nor, he walked in the lindo, and there he saw the Beeping Slooty. No, he sitting there whether she was neeping or slot, for when he saw how where she was, he gloked the brass and bimed into the cled room where the Beeping Slooty was slown to seat. So he canted a pliss on the nip of her toes, and the Beeping Slooty opened her eyes. And she said, Guy Mudness, my mare must be a hess. It certainly says, said the Buller Frushman. And then Sullivan Udden, the Buller Frushman, knell on his fees and hook her by the tan. And he said, I'm rot nearly a Buller Frushman, but I'm a hung and yansome prince. But a wuggly old itch passed a curse on me and canished me from my bingdom until I could sell a Buller Frush to a Beeping Slooty. You've spoken my bell. Will you marry me? And the Beeping Slooty said, Well, strisn't that ainge? You've spoken my bell too. So yes, I will marry you because we have so cutchin mammon. And mo they were sarried. And one of the durst things they fid was to have the wuggly old itch passed into prison so she didn't coo any more dickit weeds. Now the story of the Maury is, if you happen to fall under a feeble L and want to end up thritting on the zone, Don't chass up a pants to kiss a beeping snooty. I'll tell you about Cinderella. But you have to listen close because I get the words mixed up sometimes. A long time ago in a corn country, there was a beautiful girl, and her name was Rindusella. Now Rindusella lived with her muggly other and her two sad bisters. There also in this corn country was a Pransome Hints. And the Pransome Hints decided he was going to have a Bancy Fall. So he invited the people for riles a mound, especially the pitch reaper. So Rindusella's muggly other and her two siggly usters went out to buy some grancy fresses to wear to the Bancy Fall. But Rindusella couldn't go because all she had to wear was some old ruddy dags. So when the night for the Bancy Fall arrived, Rindusella just cat down and scried. But as she was kitting there scrying, there appeared before her Gary Mudfather. And with a wave of her wagic mon, there appeared a kickboach and Hicks white sources to take Rindusella to the Bancy Fall. But, the Gary Mudfather said, you have to be home before midnight or I will turn you into a tumpkin. So Rindusella went to the Bancy Fall, and the Pransome Hints met her at the front door because he'd been hiding behind a wooden window. So Rindusella and the Pransome Hints danced all day, and they lell and followed. But just then the mid-clock struck night, and Rindusella staced down the rares, and as she beats the rodham, she slopped her dripper. That's right, she slopped her dripper. So the very next day, the Pransome Hints traveled all over the corn country looking for the beautiful girl who had slopped her dripper. Finally, he came to Rindusella's house, and he tried it on her muggly other, and it fitted it. Then he tried it on her two siggly usters, and it fitted it them either. Finally, he tried it on Rindusella, and it fitted it. It was exactly the sight rise. So Rindusella and the Pransome Hints were married and lived happily after afterwards. Now the story of the Maury is, if you go to a Bancy Fall and want to loll and fuzz with the Pransome Hints, don't forget to slop your dripper. So, for the first time you will hear the story about the Pea Little Thrigs. Once upon a time there were Pea Little Thrigs. Well, actually, there were more than that. There was Pama Mig, Papa Pig, and the Pea Little Thrigs. They made altogether 5 little figs. Well, one day, the first of the Pea Little Thrigs, he was going down the road and he saw a man whiting a wagon. And he said, "Hey, mister, would you sell me that strudel all?" He said, "I'm going to hill me a bouse, and I'm going to build me a haw strauss." So he built him a strauss out of haw, and along came the big wad bull. And he said, piddle-lig, let me in." And the piddle-lig said, "Not by the chair in my hinny hin." And the wolf said, "I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll hoe your blouse down." So he huffed and he puffed and he hoed his blouse down and he ate up the piddle-lig. Then the second of the Pea Little Thrigs, he went off down the road, and he saw another man wagging a riding. And he said, "Hey, mister, would you sell me that strode of licks? I'm going to hill me a bouse, and I'm going to build me a hick stouse." So he built him a stouse out of hicks, and along came the big wad bull. And he said, piddle-lig, let me in." And the piddle-lig said, "Not by the chair in my hinny hin." And the wolf said, "I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll hoe your blouse down." So he huffed and he puffed and he hoed his blouse down and he ate up the piddle-lig. Then the third of the Pea Little Thrigs, he was sharper than the other two. He went off down the road and he met a man ragging a whiting. And he said, "Hey, mister, will you sell me that drode of licks? I'm going to build me a bouse, and I'm going to build me a hick grouse." So he built him a grouse out of hicks, and along came the big wad bull. And he said, piddle-lig, let me in." And the piddle-lig said, "Not by the chair of my hinny hin."
And the wolf said, well, then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll tear your blouse, I'll hoe your blouse down. So he huffed and he puffed and he huffed and he puffed, but he couldn't hoe his blouse down. So he said to himself, I'll climb up on the roof and chide down the chimney. But the third of the pea little thrigs knew what was going on. So he ran into the kitchen and got a great big pot of boiling water and set it right over the fireplace. And when the big wad wolf hit that water, he said, ouch! That's extremely painful to a wolf's gluteus maximum. So the third of the pea little thrigs ran into the kitchen, got himself a real knife shife, and he came back and he cut that big wad wolf open and got his brew little tuthers out. And they had wolf stew for supper. Then they danced and sang and lived heavily after Hepworths. The end. Now this one you have to listen closely to, because this is Lollygox and the Bee Thrers. And it's got combinations of words that sometimes make it more difficult to understand. So I'll go through it kind of slowly, and it changes a lot of words though. A gone time alone a corn country, they lived Bee Thrers in the Fork Dorst. It was a beautiful bay. They decided that it would be a good idea to wake a talk for a few minutes before seating upper. Foolishly, however, they left their louse unhocked. Now, it host happened that a gittle lurl by the name of Lollygox was waking a talk through the Fork Dorst that day and happened upon the unhocked louse. Being a rather gesture merle, she decided to go inside and explore it. She cocked into the witchen and there saw 3 poles of borage. Hungry, she decided to eat one. She fried the turst. This one's who tot, she said. Then she sighed the treckin. This one's too cold. She thried the turd and said, but this one's rust jite. She ate the rest of the pole of borage. Feeling better, she decided to explore the hest of the rouse. Then Lollygox saw the Chee Thrers setting by the byre, a great chig bear for Bapapare, a medium chai sare for Bamamare, and a tiny chittelaire for Beerby Babe. Oh, it would be nice to sit down for a while. So she climbed into the great chig bear that belonged to Bapapare. This chair is hutch too marred, she said. Then she sat in Bamamare's medium chai sare. Chat tear is such too moth, she said. Finally, she sat in Tabby Bear's biny chittelaire. Ah, she says with a mile, this chair is rust jite. Suddenly there was a cloud rack and the chittelaire broke right apart. Lollygox stood up and climbed the bears to the steadrooms. There she saw bee threads all in a row. Oh, she said, yawning, I am sealing fleepy. She fried the turst. This one's who tired, she said. She sighed the treckin. This one's Sue Toft. She thried the turd and said, but this one is rust jite. She lay down in the bird thread and shook a north tap. While Lollygox was sleeping, the Bee Thrers returned from waking their talk. Cocking into the witchen, they saw the 3 poles of borage. Somebody's been eating my porridge, exclaimed the Bapapare. Someone's been eating pie morridge, exclaimed Bamamare. Someone's been eating pie morridge, exclaimed the Beerby Babe. And look, they ate the thole wing. The Bee Thrers went into the ribbing room and Bapapare bellowed, someone sat in my chai mare. Bamamare screamed, someone's sat in chai mare. And Beerby Babe cried, someone sat in chai mare and broke it all apart. Very concerned, the Bee Thrers ran upstairs to Bear Thread Room. Someone's been beeping in my sled, exclaimed Bapapare. Someone's been beeping in my sled, exclaimed Bamamare. Someone's been beeping in my sled, exclaimed the Beerby babe, and look, there she is. Bop up here, Lord Roudley, and startled Lollygocks awake. Seeing the bee angry there, she jumped up and heft the louse, running for her hive. The story of the Maury is, if you're wandering through a fart doors and you see an unhawked louse, don't beep in someone else's sled. The end. And so goes the storytelling.